The hall is too bright for grief. Fluorescent cones wash the community center's parquet floor until the varnish looks wet, as if the planks themselves are sweating under the weight of everyone's eyes. I feel the carved edges of my silver bracelet cooling against my pulse as the military officer at the double doors lifts 2 fingers to the brim of his cap and signals his team to hold. It's mid-afternoon in Karachi, and the air finds every seam in the windows, bringing the smell of salt and diesel in thin, persistent ribbons. My father's portrait stands on an easel beside the folded flag, both steadied with transparent tape that whispers when the air conditioner kicks to life. He looks slightly bemused in the photo, as if someone just told him a poor joke and he's deciding whether to reward it. 30 minutes from now, the jokes end. A single snicker echoes from the second row. My cousin Sana, in a black choutouche that could sponsor a full year of school fees, tilts her head toward my wrist, and the cluster around her follow the tilt. Charm bracelets are for Sweet 16, she murmurs, just loud enough to be overheard. Laughter slides across the benches like light skittering on water. In the picture, my father still looks amused. In the casket, he does not. I place my hand flat on the flag, steadying it, the texture of the weave sharp under the heel of my palm. We are minutes away from the formal military salute. A courtesy the Air Force extends to retired logistics officers. And the family is already practicing pettiness as if it were a hymn. The officer flight lieutenant Rihan catches my eye and inclines his head by a millimeter. A question. Are you ready? Almost, I tell him. My voice comes out even like a ruler edge. One sentence skims across my mind, too neat for the noise in the room. And because I have learned to say it before someone else frames me, I let it pass my teeth and hang there. Seems I'm not family. Santa blinks because the line is a mirror and she doesn't like what it returns. I keep my fingers on the flag and look down the length of the hall. The benches are the rented kind, glossy and slightly tacky under the skin. And somebody's cologne cloying. Barbershop sweet sits like syrup over the tang of tea, and fried samosas cooling on aluminum trays near the kitchen pass. On the far wall, the cheap brass clock clicks and clicks. An older woman in the back has removed her heels. They sit beneath her chair like tired little boats. My step-uncle Javed leans against a pillar with the casual gravity of someone who believes pillars were invented for him. He is a retired banker in the way a fox is retired from the hen house, technically accurate, misleading in practice. His tie is navy, understated. The knot is small and precise, like a practiced lie. Rihan shifts. The soldiers behind him settle their boots. A little grind of rubber on floor that sounds like the earlier laughter being erased with an eraser that doesn't want to cooperate. The air conditioner hums, and the tiny lights strung around the portrait flicker, settling into their cycle. In the next minutes, you'll see how a salute can quiet a room and how a bracelet no one respected will end a family language. That sounded like inheritance, but was only appetite. I have receipts in my bag that make the bracelet less of an ornament and more of a latchkey. This is not revenge. It is process. The room has a geometry that would make any auditor smile. Lines, nodes, the predictable flow of vanity. Javed and Santa have placed themselves near the center aisle to intercept condolences like tolls. My stepmother Farah is set slightly behind them, her chiffon a shimmering fog. A cluster of my father's Air Force friends have gathered near the doors, cutting off the wind that sneaks in whenever someone enters the hall and bringing with them scratch of dress shoes and the rough wool smell of old uniforms. Near the tea samovars, a neighbor named Belil, who's really my father's friend more than mine, keeps circling the sugar bowl as if he's guarding it from a future theft. He used to be a quartermaster and still moves with that forward lean as if a list in his pocket is tugging him along. Under the third bench, 2 places down from where I stand, lies a small envelope I planted 10 minutes ago when no one was watching because Sana had a microphone voice and everybody else preferred her channel. The envelope is unsealed, addressed to V. My father hardly saved full names in his phone. He liked letters and codes more than labels. He said it kept people honest. If someone needs their name in your phone to feel like themselves, he once told me you shouldn't be calling them. My bracelet bites my wrist when I flex my hand. And the small pain sharpens the edges of my sight. The box of sharpened pencils sits on the table near the condolence register, the points aligned like a decision. I built this room deliberately in my head last night. When the coastal fog turned the streetlights into hazy moons, and the apartment upstairs ran their blender at a cruel hour, I mapped where the officers would stand, who would monopolize which corners, where the AC would blow hardest so that anyone in chiffon would retreat inward and leave space for movement. When the laughter at my wrist swept the hall, I let it curl and collapse. I've learned to treat contempt like steam gibbet surfaces, to condense against, collect the drops, and measure. My father taught me that. Maybe not with those exact words. He taught me through boxes of receipts he kept from his years managing military logistics. The way he rolled them with rubber bands and wrote dates lengthwise along their spines. When I was 10, he taught me to read a ledger and find the part where someone got lazy. Lazy, he said, is the only synonym for caught that has any poetry. You can hear the snare drum in it. He tapped the desk and pointed to the same shape over and over again, the line where a supplier had been. Paid twice for a pallet of munitions and once for their silence. He never said what he did after he found the pattern. He didn't need to. He kept his career and a stubborn reputation for being both disloyal and inconvenient. People called him by his rank long after he retired. He told me to keep my paperwork squared, my mouth quiet, and my options open. I obeyed in my way. I became a forensic auditor. It is not a glamorous job. It's a craft that feels like pulling thread from a sweater while the party goes on around you and counting out the inches without letting the unraveling rope burn your palm. You learn where people stash their weaknesses in revised invoices, in line items labeled MISC, in the swollen margins of an after-hours fee, in reminders to self like send notarized letters that they never follow with a sent folder. You learn to touch the edges of power without catching the infection of it. And you learn to sit still while someone laughs at your bracelet because it is steadier to wait than to swing. Sana shifts because silence is a draft she can't bear. It's not diamonds even, she says, almost kindly. How sentimental. The metal against my wrist is cool. My father's initials etched inside where the skin remembers them. A simple fasten that presses into a small crescent. The bracelet is not meant to be seen. It's a key. Ladies and gentlemen. Farah rises with both hands pressed to her lap, that practiced grief that photographs well. We'll begin the salute now. The amplified grief vibrates in the chest cavity like a pulled string. Rihan steps forward, his cap glossy as a beetle, his posture a lesson. We'll observe the honors due to a man who served, he says. His voice is unornamented. You can hang process from it like a coat. The soldiers move. They lift, tuck, align. The flag tightens on its fold like a breath held. The first notes of the bugle float in from the doorway, thin and silver, and the room shrinks its shoulders. My eyes water not the showy, slow kind, but the salt instinct that happens when brass and memory meet. As the final tone hangs and thins, the officer lays the folded flag in my arms. It is all corners, stiffness, and weight, fabric that smells faintly of starch. The room is still enough that I hear the brass clock click twice into the new quiet. Thank you, I tell him. For your father, he says. And for the process, I answer, because the words steady me like a wall. He tilts his head. A small smile chips at his regulation expression. He will be useful later, not because he is kind, but because he respects forms. Respecting forms is a kind of kindness. Jave coughs into his fist and steps into the aisle, his shoes whispering. He's been waiting for the instruments to be put away before playing his theme. One announcement, he says with a softness that ripples for attention. In the spirit of closure. As you know, I was my brother's closest confidant these last years, handling so many of his practicalities. An old man's chores, if you will. People chuckle because they want the choir leader to like their voices. I'll be shepherding the estate and ensuring Farah and the children. His hand floats lazily in my direction without landing, are looked after. The word children is carefully plural. I am 41. I'm tired of being plural when it is convenient. At the back, Villar folds his arms and fixes on Javeth, the gaze he used to reserve for incoming requisitions that smelled like trouble. Rehan doesn't move, but I can see his jaw set. Sana, poor thing, misses the current and throws in her glitter and small items of sentimental value. Of course, have no place in the inventory. She looks at my wrist. She wants the bracelet in the category of trinket. She wants me in the category of accessory. I don't walk to the lectern. I don't bang on anything. I take 3 steps to the condolence table and pick up the register, turning it to the first page where someone has written slantwise, Ina lillahi, wa, ina ilahi, rajien, to God we belong and to him we return. The ink is still wet near the flourish. I lift one of the sharpened pencils. I slide open my bag and take out the folded set of papers that I had printed this morning at a copy shop where the fan rattled. And the boy behind the glass found a way to smile with his eyebrows, 'cause the line was long and the toner was temperamental. The papers are too ordinary to look like a fuse. I like that about them. There is a sound the room makes when it feels a change in the pressure. It's not a gasp. Karachi doesn't gasp. It's more like the hush that happens before a monsoon push, the way the air collects at the edge of itself. I let that pressure hold. Then I say, we'll hear Javid soon. I keep my voice at a courtroom temperature, neither cold enough to sting nor warm enough to soften. But first, a small piece of order. Sana can't help it. You are making Dad's day about your paperwork. Farah tucks a veil edge into itself. Mariam, later. Later is how this family became a system, I say, and I let the word system land like a stamp. We'll do it now. I place the first document on the condolence table. It's the way you place a cutting board and lay down garlic because the meal will not make itself. The first paper is a rescission letter. It revokes a power of attorney my father had granted Javed last year to manage a temporary transfer of a property in Clifton while he sorted tenancy. It is signed by my father, executed 10 days before he entered the hospital. Witnessed by 2 neighbors whose handwriting looks like they were taught by slates. It is notarized in blue. The notaries seal an 8-petaled flower that catches the light when the AC breathes. The date sits like a hinge. The day before Javed made himself a key. The second paper is the trust. My father redrafted it with his lawyer Sema, who is standing near the samovar wearing a severe ponytail and a pair of glasses, whose thin rims make her look like anything but a concession. The new trust cancels the prior and places a condition on a large account. Everyone assumed was sloshing loose. Distributions require co-authorization by me and the executor. Farah is named executor. She looks like a woman who has discovered a new room in her house and doesn't know where the light switch is. Forgive me, Javed says smoothly, stepping closer. He has always had the voice of a man who believes the bank considers him furniture. You've produced a set of papers? Do you expect us to accept them because of your expertise? I expect you to accept them because they were filed with the registrar, I say. And recorded. I tap the bottom of the page. The recording number is long and ugly. A string with a small twist in it, like a cobra's neck. The stamp is purple and flat. And because you received the certified copy, I let that settle. Courier slip signature, Javed Ahmed, dated last Thursday. That gets the first real flinch. It's a small wind through a reed. Nothing melodramatic, but a reed bends only after it is sure the wind intends to return. Sema clears her throat tiny, the way a pew creaks. I was at the signing. She raises her phone, scrolls, and then reads subject line, Trust Amendments Executed Scan Attached. Timestamp 1442. From my office to Javed's email. I receive hundreds of emails, Javed says. The tie knot is closer to the skin now. Bilal speaks without moving his arms. But you open the ones that move money. The AC sends down a rib of cold. I feel it along my neck like an answer. The bugle clean of the salute is still in the air like the outline of a leaf after it has fallen. I press the bracelet into the soft part of my wrist. The metal knows my pulse well enough to be gentle. What's missing right now is shrieking. That's on purpose. I leave shrieking to children and men with empty folders. Instead, I stack present. Notarize the accounts of a man who raised me to believe fires are managed by cutting off oxygen, not by dancing around them. We'll return to Clifton, I say. We'll return to the plot remittance. First, a smaller thing. I nod toward the second bench. Under the seat, you'll find an envelope addressed to V. Santa looks as if I've suggested a magic trick, unworthy of a funeral. But the businessman at the end of the bench, someone's husband who never got comfortable with the family's theater, reaches down and slides the envelope forward with his shoe. The paper makes a small hiss along the floor. Javad's eyes go to it, then away. This is a stage, he says, not unkindly. You're making a stage. This is a ledger, I say, and a ledger is as public as its numbers. I pick up the envelope and shake out a single page. It's a screen print, a transfer confirmation to a charity account Vasila Foundation from my father's personal account, distinct from the trust. The amount is large enough to shift the river. The charity treasurer is listed on the transfer alert by first initial and surnames, V. Patel. The memo line is my father's handwriting clipped into text. Q3 scholarships perpetual. I let the paper sit on the table like a pane of glass. Vasila Billa says softly from the back, school fees. That place in Liari. It's a part of my father that none of you posted about, I say lightly. It's a knife without gleam. That's not an indictment. That's context. I slip the screen print under the trust and add a third sheet. The bank's acknowledgement of the recurring transfer schedule continuing past his death. Confirmed by the bank manager last night. The manager is on speaker in my bag, ready to confirm again. People consider recorded calls rude until they need the exact words to prove something happened. The smell of chai grows stronger. Somebody turns down the flame under the samovar and the kettle sighs. A child near the back begins to fuss, a hiccuping rhythm like a photocopier when the paper jams. Besides, I say, we need to address assets you moved without co-authorization. The words are clean. They do not rush. I unfold a fourth paper, a reversal request filed with the bank's compliance team with 2 wire IDs highlighted, 9342XA and 9350BH. Both processed through Javid's login while my father was in the hospital. The log shows his IP address. The wires were to vendors with charmingly generic names, Gulf City Holdings and Darna Ventures. The reversal request sits under a freeze code stamped in red. F2117. A compliance officer I know from a NATO procurement audit 3 years ago saw the names, whistled a tune I recognized, and escalated with speed that felt like admiration. She doesn't send flowers. She sends holds. Temporary transfers, Javed says, too quickly, as was planned. Planned. I lift a fifth paper. It's the partnership deed for a tiny shop my father coned in Seder with Billa's cousin. Second-hand books. Cheap prints of paintings that look good from far away. A glass counter that always smelled faintly of the last person's cigarettes because it absorbs stories with indiscriminate hunger. The deed includes my name as a silent partner. I run my finger under Clause 12. Dissolution upon death. Total control of funds transfers to Mariam Khan until accounts settled per witness statements on file. The witnesses are the 2 neighbors whose handwriting runs like water but whose honesty sits like stone. The shop accounts moved through the same bank that hosts the trust. Those wire IDs 9342XA and 9350BH resemble the IDs my father showed me last month when he explained how he was organizing the scholarship endowment. What Javed told himself was a mirror of a past transaction. It was a stamp. He tried to make his path look like an earlier trail. He forgot I archive. Stop. Farah's voice trembles itself into strength. Stop, both of you. We will, I say. As soon as the reversal is confirmed, I nod toward my bag. Seema, would you mind? She taps her phone. The speaker crackles alive with the flat bright of an office line. This is Hina from First Karachi Bank, a woman says. Am I speaking with Mariam Khan? You are, I say. We're on speaker in a family gathering. We'll keep it brief. Understood, she says. Voices in the background, a printer, a cough, a keyboard warmed by too many fingers. Your freeze request code F2117 is in place under Fraud Prevention Authority pending formal review. The 2 wires have been reversed status. It's changed to rescinded as of 13/20. A confirmation has been emailed to the authorized parties. Authorized parties, Jave says. Mariam Khan says, and executor Farah Ahmed. Farah inhales. Her exhale is ragged velvet. Javed's hands open, close. I hear a bead of sweats path along his temple more than I see it. I can feel the current of his calculation reassigning itself like a tide losing interest in this part of shore. Thank you, Hina, I say. One more thing. Please state the date the power of attorney was revoked. Revocation recorded on September 21st, she says, witnessed and countersigned by Seima Qureshi advocate. Thank you, I say. We'll send you the audit trail after the gathering. I hang up. The room turns its head toward me like a single animal. Sena touches her shawl and calls on the favor of sorrow. This is unnecessary. We're grieving, I know, I say. And grief, as my father liked to remind me, is not an excuse for inventory errors. I smile because the memory feels like a tabletop between us, polished and unbreakable. We'll make fewer mistakes if we rely on process. Farah lowers herself back onto the bench. She looks small only if I use the wrong measurements. She nods once, a little engine turning over. We continue later, she says. We continue in my living room with tea and the lawyer and no audience. Agreed, I say. Except for one more housekeeping note. I hold up my wrist. The bracelet glints. This isn't sentimental. Santa blinks toward it as if the metal might now be a snake that has learned to spell. The bracelet, I say, is a key. The soldiers near the door shift, like men park themselves when the terrain changes. My father's lockbox at the Veterans Welfare Office uses this as a split key. It will open only if my biometric matches and the bracelet's micro-etched ID syncs. No diamonds. Just design. There is a small etched code on the inside of the silver near the curve where it presses against the ligaments. I tilt my wrist. The code catches the light. The room takes a breath through its teeth. You're inventing drama, Javed says, but it's less of a sentence and more of a plea to a god he doesn't tithe to. Rihan steps forward then, his foot falls counting the short space between his work and this family's hobby. Ms. Khan. He says, would you like an escort to the veterans office after this? If the lockbox must be opened in the presence of a witness, as many do in such cases, we can comply. Thank you, I say. Yes, compliance is one of the few words that holds multiple flavors of dignity at once. We finish the gathering with the rituals. My father wanted prayers piled into a mound of sound. A few stories that he would have heckled if he'd had the microphone. A standing line of men and then women laying hands on my shoulder and saying that he was a man who did not make others small to feel tall. The tea thins in the pot. The samosas go cold. The aluminum trays smell vaguely like the ghost of onion. The sun slices sideways through the tall windows, turning particles into gold knots I could pluck and pocket if that changed anything. On the way out, Billow stops me. His breath smells like cardamom and sugar. You held him, he says, meaning my father and also meaning something else. The line. Thank you for the shop, I say. He liked the smell of ink and paper, Bilal says. Said it was cheaper than any perfume. Outside, the heat takes the cool from my skin like a bill collector. The asphalt is a drum under our shoes. Rihan meets me near the curb where the air tastes like battery acid. He has a file tucked under his arm that says nothing but is clearly useful. In the car, Farah sits beside me. She's removed her earrings and they lie in her palm like 2 exclamation points that lost their sentences. I didn't know about the scholarships, she says without looking at me. He kept that for himself, I say. And for them. We drive to the Veterans Welfare Office, an anonymous building with a facade that looks like it would rather exhale than inhale. The lobby smells like paper towels and old photocopiers. A fan above the clerk's desk makes a small ticking noise as it turns. Like a cricket stuck between the blades and being very patient about it. Rihan hands over his identification. I offer mine. The clerk asks me to place my wrist below a small scanner mounted on the counter, with two screws that have lost their enthusiasm for being straight. I place the bracelet under the light. It warms slightly. The scanner beeps, and a green rectangle appears on the small screen like a pond in summer. Biometric, the clerk says. Please. I press my thumb to a glass circle that glows when it recognizes that people are complicated, but fingerprints are not. There is a soft clicking from the back room, the sound cabinets make when they decide whether to cooperate. The clerk disappears and returns with a black hard case the size of a home for a small, well-behaved instrument. He sets it on the counter, flips two little latches whose satin finish has been dulled by purpose. Inside is a stack of folders the color of cardboard and patience, and on top a cloth pouch. In the pouch is my father's service badge, cool and slightly dented, the way the past sometimes dents you in a place no one can point to. Rihan steps back, letting my view widen. He watches like a man who measures distance by how often a person blinks. Take your time, he says, and the other words in that sentence are, and take what is yours. I open the top folder. A receipt sits on the first page, showing a recorded deposit into the lockbox from last year, a USB drive, two sealed envelopes, and a small ring knot, the wearing kind. The tool kind, like a ring pull with a secret. The witness signatures are there, including Sim's thin, decisive lines. I lift the USB, the metal cool as if it has practiced patience by taking a long bath in wind. It isn't labeled. I smile. My father and his letters. He would sneer at a label anyway. The first envelope is addressed to me in my father's script. His handwriting always looked like a path that knew where it was going and resented detours. I don't open it yet. I prefer to sequence, not to surprise. The second envelope is addressed to the executor. I slip both into my bag, rest my hand on the USB, and then, finally, pick up this small metal ring. It looks like nothing if you haven't been taught. If you've spent your life loving logistics, it looks like a thing you could use to open the false bottom of a box, to lift a panel that sits flush against the world and pretends it doesn't. The clerk looks politely at the ceiling. Rihan looks nowhere, which is his way of looking respectfully at everything. At home that evening, I make Farah tea and open the windows because the apartment needs air that hasn't been told what to feel. The light is the color of saffron caught in gauze. I plug the USB into my laptop. The folders inside are named with months and numbers and single letters. October 29V, Deck 7F, March 3J. It is a tidy mind's idea of a treasure hunt. I open March 3J. It is a set of audio files and screen recordings. Javad's voice sounds different when he thinks only a computer is listening. Flatter, freer, less adorned. He says things like, move it now and they won't check, and she doesn't even wear jewelry. I see his screen move through bank portals and the miscellaneous transfer. Field get abused like a neighborhood that knows all the shortcuts and none of the names. The timestamps stack. The IP addresses form a pattern that reads like a map to a place called Careless. My father had recorded this, of course. He had filed it with the lockbox. He had, in his way, delayed all of the shouting so it could be replaced with clicking. I make a list. Lists are my revenge and my prayer. I call Seima and schedule a meeting for morning. I call Hina and ask for a full audit trail of logins under Javad's credentials. I text Rihan to thank him for his time and to ask whether the ceremony paperwork can serve as witness that Farah and I are coordinating as executor and authorizer. He replies with a thumbs up and a file. A scanned page with his signature and his number. It's not officially necessary, but I like people who over-document. It's how my people tell each other we're safe. I draft letters. The verbs line up like soldiers who have trained in bad weather. Filed, served, escalated, cited. I write to the registrar, to the charity, to the bookshop vendor. I write to the HOA of the Clifton property to confirm access logs. Their guard, a man who has seen more human improv than any theater critic, leaves a voice note that says in a stage whisper that Saab came late night 3 times with men who walk like they don't want to be remembered. I save the audio. I write to the charities board where Farah Sometimes goes for luncheons and where Jave likes to act as though donors are extension cords for his projects. I request records and remind them they are records. I write to the school in Liari that receives the scholarship funds and ask for redaction of any student names if they send me receipts. I don't need to know childhood. I need to know numbers. Why do we have to do this right now? Farah asks, sitting at the other end of the sofa, elbows on knees. The fan above us shuffles warm air with the determination of an underfunded department. Because the longer the air sits, I say, the more it smells like whatever lies were sprayed into it. I look at her and make sure my voice is not an indictment. Also because money already moved. It left footprints. Let's photograph them before someone sweeps. She nods. She picks up the envelope with her name. Her fingers bruise the corners. She opens it with the care of someone undressing a memory. There is a letter in my father's writing and a set of keys. The letter says, in the way my father conjugated love and duty in the same sentence, that he chose her as executor not because he wanted to make her life hard, but because he wanted to make it honest. He tells her she will be tempted to be fair rather than precise, and that he hopes she chooses precise because it is a kind of fairness that does not depend on who is watching. She cries, but not loudly. He didn't teach loud. In the days that follow, the house becomes a post office. Notices arrive and leave. Couriers come with envelopes that have been stamped by bored men and women in rooms that smell like toner and discipline. Someone knocks to deliver a sealed documenta signed affidavit from the HOA. Guard, who is vain and asked me to correct his spelling and then signed with a little flourish, as if the flourish could set fire to a lie. I record calls. I transcribe. I notarize and swear. The doorbell becomes a metronome for a kind of music I respect beyond taste. At the bank, Hina sits across from us with a file that could prop a door. She is the kind of woman who looks like she folds laundry with pleasure because it gives her mind somewhere to sit. Here, she says, sliding across printouts. Login times, IP addresses, reversal confirmations. Here, she says again. Scheduled payments, stop orders, transfer rescissions. She has highlighted everything as if we are in kindergarten and color can compensate for the cruelty of form. Compliance is commencing an internal review, she says. We will cooperate with law enforcement if needed. If needed is bank for when Miriam is done, Sema murmurs. Law enforcement tends to like cases where all the tabs are open. Heine says, and then gives me a look that is not quite a compliment and absolutely is one. Thank you for the tabs. I thank her with the only thing that matters in our species. A competent nod and a neatly written acknowledgement that I will not make her repeat herself later. After we leave, Sema touches my arm. We should talk about Javij, she says. His appetite is bigger than his table. Later, I say, and this time I mean later in a musical sense and iteration. A chorus we will return to when we have put the instruments in the right hands. The receipts converge. It's a satisfying word, converge. It describes emotion where separate lines discover they are not strangers. The charity confirms the standing order and notes. 2 attempted cancellations from an interested party that were rejected per the Trusts Clause. The HOA logs show Javid's late-night entries. The bookshop's vendor shows a ledger with 2 advances he was never told about. Both lined against the partnership account and both labeled temporary. We freeze those 2. Billo brings me a stack of old receipts my father kept under the counter for gossip, he says. And we find a pattern that mirrors the wires. The same vendor's names in small amounts years ago. Javdi was practicing with tiny thefts, rehearsing for his solo. Practice makes permanent when no one claps. We schedule one more gathering. Not a funeral. A house meeting. Farah insists we do it in the living room with cushions and small plates and the decency of shoes left at the door. I prefer tables, but I would be replaced by carpet for a day because my father would ask me to be strategic with my intolerance. The public stage is smaller than the hall, but the stakes have set up their own lighting. The same players arrive. Javed in navy, ties slightly looser. Sana in an outfit that mistakes cost for gravity. Bilal, who pretends to be ornamental and fails. Seema with her bite-sized briefcase. Rihan, which surprises everyone except me. He brings a copy of a statute that governs military survivor benefits and the line that says, in neat ghoul legalese, that misrepresentation concerning those benefits is a felony. He doesn't say the word felony. He doesn't have to. He places the photocopy on the low table like a coaster and then does not set his glass on it. Respect looks like that sometimes. I invite Javed to speak first. He does. He manages sincerity the way an old car manages a hill, eventually with a sound. He says he only wanted to smooth things, that banks are complicated, that delays are humiliating. That he wanted to save Farah from queues and forms and clerks whose shoulders have eaten all their pity. He says he's doing his best to hold us together. Sana nods on his commas. When he's done, I thank him. Then I lay out the receipts. I start with the small ones. The old ledgers. The HOA guard's affidavit. The call logs. I place the reversal confirmations next to the attempted cancellations. Seema reads a short letter from the registrar confirming the revocation. Hina's printouts of the audit trail arrive like dominoes that refuse to fall. They stand, each a small rectangle of facts too stubborn to be knocked down by narrative. I let him read. I do not narrate while he reads. The room breathes the smell of coriander and dust. A neighbor down the hall boils something that wants to be sweet. The light from the street lifts and falls as a bus passes. The fan wobbles once and then finds itself again. When he looks up, his eyes are the size of someone who had a map and followed it and discovered. The map led to a lake with his name spelled backwards on the surface. There are explanations, he says. There are explanations. I agree. Write them, then countersign, then witness. Then we'll read them. Sena sets her jaw. She startles the room with a sudden little laugh, the kind that happens when humor arrives to test. If anyone is expendable enough to perform it, this is ridiculous, she says. You're not a judge. I'm a witness, I say. And I brought more. I hold up my wrist. The bracelet glints. I have not needed to say its purpose again, but I do. To remind him? To remind me. This open the lockbox, I say. Your name is in the files. March 3J. The recordings. He swallows. There is a small scar on his chin I have never noticed, a white comma. He says, very softly, seems I'm not family. The line lands differently here. It isn't a weapon. It's an inventory report. He knows it. I know it. I do not wince at the echo. I was ready to be echoed. Family is not a deed. I say, it's compliance. He flinches again, subtly. It's as close as he comes to apology. It is not enough. I file it anyway in the folder labeled things I will not forget but also will not feed. We make decisions then, measured and notarized with pens that leave confident trails. Farah revokes keys and codes in a letter we both sign. Rihan witnesses with a neutral gaze that is neither protection nor threat. It is simply a wall. Sena returns the duplicate keys to the Clifton property that she should not have had. Seema drafts a memorandum of understanding that Javed will repay certain sums immediately and others according to a schedule that is realistic in the sense that he will suffer. We report, we comply. We serve documents with couriers whose hands smell like ink and motorcycle. Then I make one gesture that is not necessary legally, but is essential structurally. I take the scholarship receipt that shows the next Fasila disbursement and I place it in the center of the table. This, I say, continues no matter who thinks they are in charge this week. It is the one instruction of my father that I treat as an order rather than as a wish. Farah rests 2 fingers on the receipt. Yes, she says. Every quarter. Her voice is low enough to be a fuse. Ripples come. They always do. People who pretended to enjoy Javed's jokes stop laughing quite so hard. 2 donors from the charity board ask me to run an audit workshop informally, which is short for do the work without making us feel short. The bank issues a quiet apology for not flagging the wires sooner. Hina gets a note in her file that I hope translates into money. The HOA updates their night entry policy. The bookshop changes the petty cash process in a way that would bore anyone who does not find safety in boredom. Santa texts me a month later a message that begins with if and ends with. Without risking a noun, I respond with a list of school districts that need volunteers to help with evening reading programs and a schedule with dates and times. She doesn't reply for a week, then sends me a picture of her sitting cross-legged on a tiny plastic chair holding a book that has been read. So many times it is a miracle binding still keeps faith. I file the picture in a folder that has nothing to do with court and everything to do with after. Javed sells the watch he bought when he thought his position came with a crown. He pays the first chunk of what he owes, and then, to my quiet surprise, pays the second on time. Seema says it's because I scared him. I think it's because he realizes he has more dignity naked than in theft. I do not congratulate him. I do not punish him. I return his receipt, stamped, paid, and write in the margin per schedule because the margin deserves usefulness too. On the day we scatter my father's ashes at sea. The breeze is the precise temperature of a good apology. Not warm enough to presume, not cold enough to withhold. The Coast Guard boat hums its workman's hum. Farah holds the urn and I hold the folded flag, and between us we hold the man who described love as doing the boring things without being asked. Billow says the prayer. Rihan does not come. He sends a message that reads simply, for a man who liked lists, and includes a photograph of a checklist with all the boxes ticked. I laugh out loud on the boat and then cry, which is the right order. After we return home, I sit at the small desk my father built from reclaimed wood in a year when he decided to make things with his hands. Because numbers had been too heavy for a while. The light is a pewter spoon in the afternoon. The room smells like pencil shavings and fabric softener. I take off the bracelet and set it beside the service badge. I open the envelope addressed to me. The letter is short. He writes, "You take after me in the ways that make people uncomfortable when they've planned for fog. Do not apologize for turning on lights. Also, eat more fruit." There is a list enclosed of people he wants me to check on neighbors, a retired driver. The woman who brings flowers to the veterans office without writing her name anywhere. The list is subheaded. Later, his joke for the tasks that do not expire. I fold it and place it under the magnet on the fridge. The magnet is shaped like a samosa. It kills me. I return the bracelet to my wrist. I go to the kitchen and wash the cups from the morning in water that starts to cold and ends to hot. The soap smells like lemons that can't imagine snow. I dry the cups with a towel that has lost its right to be called white. Then I take the trust folder from the drawer. And in neat block letters on a sticky note, I write, "Standing Order Scholarship Queue for confirmed." I place it on top of the folder. It's a small yellow flag on the country of a man I loved because he believed in receipts, as a way of saying, without romance, but with absolute fidelity, I will not lie to you about what happened here. Weeks pass. The apartment learns the shape of its quiet. The fan's wobble gets worse, then better, after Bill Lell comes by with a screwdriver and a stubbornness that should be an anthem. Jave sends a notice through Seema that he wants to pause payments for a month. We reject it and cite the clause he signed that says pauses are not elastic. He pays. Sana sends another picture from the reading program. A child sleeping on a book, the book taking the shape of a pillow because paper does not mind doing double duty when the head is heavy. Farah buys a lockbox that requires 2 keys and 2 hands. She puts in it the ring tool from the veteran's case and a note that says, "For Mariam, if." I tidy my father's ledger collection into an archive that I label with a code only. I will immediately understand, and that I will explain in my will in case anyone ever needs to treat me the way I treated him, with a respect that has arithmetic. One evening, after a day that involved a spreadsheet that seemed determined to prove entropy, I walked to the seafront. The wind has bothered itself. The waves are hands clapping where no one can tell them to stop. A group of teenagers practice an elaborate dance that requires more faith and rhythm than I can muster on a Wednesday. I sit on a bench that has carved into it the sentence, "Zubaydah loves someone who doesn't know how to be loved." I run my finger over the letters. I consider how many benches are indictments disguised as declarations. A man with a tray of bracelets passes. He shakes the tray a little and the bracelets jingle like polite bells. He says, "Madam Silver lasts." Sometimes I say, "Sometimes it unlocks." He laughs. He moves on. The sky turns the color of a bruise that will not stop being evidence. I think of my father's instruction: do boring things without being asked. I make a list for tomorrow, and it includes things like confirm scholarship, wire and check with Billy Al on the inventory, and buy lemons and send Sema the scanned affidavit and water. The plant that refuses to admit it is alive. It includes call Farah about the fan mount because the wobble has returned with ambitions. For months after the funeral, the charity holds a small event. They do not ask me to speak because they have learned that I do not make good decoration. They ask me to stand at the back and to check their numbers quietly before the speeches begin. I do. The numbers behave. A little boy whose backpack is far too large for his ambitions bumps into my knees and says sorry without looking up, as if apologies are currency and he wants to tip well. I pat his head and think of the memo line on the wire. Q3 scholarships perpetual. The word that matters is not scholarship or even Q3. It's the last one. Perpetual is a promise maths makes when humans are good. On my way out, the director stops me to hand me a laminated card with my father's name on it and a small line beneath, in honor of a man who kept receipts and kept his word. I press my thumb to the lamination and feel it give a little under the pressure. The lamination smells faintly of vinegar. Outside, the evening has that comforting stink of wet dust and hot stone that happens when the city tries to cool itself and fails. And tries again. I still dream of him sometimes. In the most faithful dream, he sits at the desk and pushes a folder toward me and says, "Check the dates." In the dream, I do. I wake up with a calm that tastes like paperwork finished, like fans correctly mounted, like men who have learned to count without stealing. It is not cinematic. It is better than cinematic. It is compliance as love. The last time I see Javed in a required setting, he brings me a receipt and does not comment on my bracelet. He looks at it, realizes he has no language for it anymore, and looks away. "We're done," he asks. And he means money, and he means theater, and he means I hope this is the last time I have to sit across from you and feel measured. "We're done," I say, "as long as you keep doing the boring things." He nods, he leaves. The room he was in seems relieved the way rooms do when a smell exits. That night, I sit on the balcony with Farah and Bilal, and we eat fruit because my father told me to and because summer has made. Local mangoes, the sort of argument you can win with silence. The street below hums. The lights stutter once, as if the city is proving it still can. We do not talk about the case. We talk about the fan mechanism and the stupidly brave cat that has adopted our building, and a news story about a clerk who found a way to save his office money by putting the printer on a timer, so it stops pretending to need ink at midnight. We talk about how paperwork is a kind of prayer if you mean it. Farah leans her head on my shoulder for a moment and then pretends she didn't. Billa says, "Stay, he'd be pleased," and the heir obedient carries the sentence gently and does not drop it. I take off the bracelet and hold it in my palm. In the dim, it is only a crescent of cool. In daylight, it is a key. In a hall, it was a laugh line. In a living room, it was a lever. Objects behave according to the instructions we learn to hear under the noise. I slide it back on. Clicks. It does not sparkle. It does something better. It fits. If this brought you a needed breath of calm power, share it with someone who's weathering a noisy room. And if you want more first-person justice like this, pass it on and follow so you don't miss the next case.